They're the future faces of terrorism. Children, some as young as 7, learning how to carry out homicide bombings at a Taliban terror school. The recruiting process and training is detailed in a new report by West Point's Combating Terrorism Center.
Christine Fair is a senior fellow there and also a professor at Georgetown, and she's joining us from our D.C. Bureau. Good morning to you.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing fine, although I'm a little troubled by this information that the Taliban now apparently running out of grown-ups, that they're using kids as terrorists, and ultimately kids are lousy terrorists. Tell us why.
Well, actually, there's really nothing new in this. I remember in 2007 when I was working with the UN mission in Afghanistan. I authored their suicide bombing report. We found several instances of very young children, as young as 7, being sent out on a mission, having been recruited, i.e. forcefully removed from a madrasa or even in some cases private schools in Waziristan, and they actually went up to the coalition soldiers that they were intended to kill, but in fact they turned themselves in. So what's interesting about the Afghan Taliban is that they've been doing suicide bombing intensively since 2005, but they're really bad at it. They are the world's worst suicide bombers.
Kids.
Even after 5 years of this, 1 in 2 only kill themselves.
Yeah. Are you talking about Afghani terrorists in general, or Afghani kids who are recruited as terrorists?
Well, the issue with the suicide bombing in Afghanistan, and it's also true in Pakistan, but not as severely, we actually don't know that much about the actual bombers, because once they blow themselves up, there's very little that can be done, certainly by the Afghans, to identify them. And they're usually first on the scene, and their way of handling a crime scene, quite frankly, is to hose the scene of the remains. So we don't have a database about the Afghan suicide bombers in the way in which you might have in Israel.
Sure.
So we're really relying upon the failed ones. And so in other words, these are the flunkies of the class.
Right.
But this is not new. Children apparently have been used by them for quite some time now.
Christine, before you go, tell us about driver's ed at this terror school for kids.
Now, to be clear, I didn't author this report. This is written by someone else. But one of the interesting things about vehicle-borne suicide bombing in Afghanistan is that they have traditionally been terrible at it because Afghans can't drive.
Right.
So one of the first things that you'll have to do is teach them how to drive. And this is actually one of the reasons why so many vehicle-borne bombings, especially in the beginning, ended in premature detonation, because they wouldn't know how to drive, and they would run into a revetment and they would detonate long before they reached their target. Now, of course, this would mean that they would disproportionately kill civilians that were not in the initial target whatsoever. So the Taliban, world's worst suicide bombers.
Very interesting report. Christine Fair, senior fellow at an assistant professor at Georgetown, thanks so much for being our guest.